Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and today we are looking at the SIG K320. There you go. It is, of course, made by Hogue, and this is a knife that got a lot of, I guess, a lot of vocal attention. I had a number of requests from various different viewers to check out this knife or to ask, have you seen this knife? What do you think about it? Um, and so, with all of that, with all of you guys sort of encouraging me, I did start to look around for one. They've been a little tough to get a hold of. Stock seems to come and then go and then come and then go. So, that's a pretty good sign. That means the knife is pretty popular. And I get the popularity. If you think about this, right, it's made by Hogue. That's pretty well common knowledge. In fact, it comes in a Hogue box. So everyone kind of is aware that it's made by Hogue, who has a great reputation. And the I think part of what the appeal to this knife is the locking mechanism and the overall similarity to the very much loved MK1G2, which is the Hogue Doug Ritter sort of Griptilian-esque knife that's very, very popular. And it by all accounts, it's a great knife. And so I think this is getting some attention because of that. It's fairly well priced. The design is firearm inspired, and gun guys really do like to have matching stuff, and Sig Sauer is a very popular brand with good reason. They do make some really nice knives, and the design is sort of inspired by a handgun, and I think you can really see the similarity if you look at this handle and where the texturing is and just how the profile looks. You can kind of see how that's inspired by a handgun. All right, so for all of those reasons, it makes sense that this is pretty popular. Even the size itself, it's not massive, but it's not so small that you feel like you're compromising anything. So, and I guess we can touch on that first of all. The size on this is pretty nice. All right, it's right in that sweet spot at around 8 inches. It's 8 and 1/16 overall. 3.5 inches on the blade, 4 and 9/16 when closed. That's just a little over 4.5 inches. That doesn't weigh too much at only 4 ounces. 3 and 3/8 inches of grip area is about the only number that you might get a little bit of that might cause a little bit of concern. I've pointed out many times that I have pretty big hands, and I really struggle with smaller handles, but this fits me fine. And you still have the option to choke up into that choil. So you really have considerably more than just the 3 and 3/8 that measures between this little bump and the front choil here. You probably could have gained a bit just by leaving this off. They didn't choose to do that, but I could see that being just a slight improvement by removing this. And then if someone did have much bigger hands than mine, it would be fine. You'd still sort of have lots of real estate out there to fit your whole hand. In terms of, the way it carries, the way it is to have on your person all the time, it's absolutely fantastic. Oh, very, very lightweight, goes in and out of pocket really easily. It's rounded. And I've said this before, knives that are squared off on the edges tend to be, at least to me, a little more noticeable in pocket. So a knife like this, where everything's nice and rounded, it rides pretty comfortably. Maybe some of you watching are like, Kevin, you're nuts. I never noticed that. But I definitely notice a difference in terms of in-pocket feel between a knife that's nicely contoured and one that isn't. Moving on to the blade, we have S30V blade. This one is black coated. This is also available in a Tanto. This is the drop point. Flat grind, bit of a swedge here at the top. They have extended the full spine back here so that when you choke up, there's sort of a place for your thumb to go. I do like that a lot. Fairly high flat grind. The blade stock is only 1/8 of an inch thick. It's 25 thousandths behind the edge, which is pretty good. We've got S30V steel here. And let me just comment a little bit on the coating. There are a couple of colors available. So this is black, obviously. There's also like a desert tan. And there is out there, I'm going to probably get this wrong. So if I give the wrong retailer, I apologize in advance. I think Smoky Mountain Knife Works has an exclusive of this knife in a stonewash finish. All right, so if if you're like me and you prefer non-coated blades, then that might be an option for you. I will say, the coating has held up pretty well, and I've had this for a few months and done quite a bit of cutting with it. And I did clean it up a little bit before the video, but it's in pretty darn good shape. You can see a little bit of rubbing and scuffing here and there, but nothing serious. Now, let me say that with any black coating, the reason I'm not in love with coatings is because eventually, even though, it's been good for a couple of months, it's not going to be good forever. Eventually it's going to wear, it's going to scrape, it's going to, you're going to hit a staple and put a big gouge in here and it's going to be really noticeable. So, that just happens with black coated knives. It's just the nature of the beast. In the meantime, if you like the look of this and you prefer the black, hey, more power to you. I'll stick with satin whenever I have the choice. Now, S30V steel, very good cutlery steel, no issue with it whatsoever. I find it fairly sharpenable, perhaps a little tougher to sharpen than say S35VN, but not much. And of course, that depends a little on the heat treat on the respective steels you're dealing with. But anyway, S30V, highly stainless, holds an edge really nicely, and so I have no complaints whatsoever about S30V. So that's the blade. I think they've done a nice job. What about the action? Well, this is a pretty, this is a pretty familiar lock type here. Okay, we have, Hogue's version of the axis lock, which they call the Able lock. And this is pretty well done. As good as any Benchmade that I've ever felt. The phosphor bronze washers, it's smooth. There's no blade play up and down or side to side, and you can see it drops shut pretty nicely there. Let's see if I can. There you go. So yeah, it's pretty smooth. So I can't really complain about that. And of course, these tend to break in a little better as time goes by. And this one's broken in pretty nicely for me. The only real complaint I have about the action here is about the lockup and deployment is more of a deployment issue. And that is this opening hole. I kind of need it to be a little bit bigger and maybe even a little bit wider. Like if they took it out to here, all right, it would be a little more comfortable for me. As it is now, I have a bit of a tough time spidey flicking the knife. I can just barely pull it off and it's not very comfortable. One thing, my finger always gets here and interferes with the lock. So if I kind of think that through and get it off there, the same thing happens to me sometimes. If I've got my index finger here when I'm trying to open, you see how I'm interfering with the bar moving out of the way, the lock bar there. So that is a little bit of a hiccup for me. I think if you were carrying this all day, every day, day in and day out, you would pretty quickly get used to that. But for me, and the other thing is you can't really flick the knife out quickly. It's a thumb roll, and I can sort of do a spidey flick, but it doesn't work well. Okay, so that's my only issue with the whole lockup and deployment discussion is this access hole, this opening hole is just a little too small. Otherwise, everything is quite well done. Finally, the handle, which happens to be one of my favorite things about this knife. The handle is very good. Now, I'm not used to saying that about an FRN handle. I'm not a fan of FRN, generally speaking. I would prefer this was done in G10. However, they've done a really, really good job. It feels solid. It doesn't compress down. So, I don't know if I can get a little bit of movement there, maybe, but very little. A part of my bias against FRN comes from the Benchmade Griptilian, which I think should never have been done in FRN. This does not have those issues. This is very solid. It feels great in hand. It's very confidence inspiring and it's very grippy. And the grip, the texturing here comes directly from Hogue's, firearm sort of technology. And so it's very tactile, very good, and I've got to give them a lot of credit for nailing this handle. It's really, really good. The ergonomics are excellent. Whether it be sort of backed off in a hammer grip, choked up into a tighter grip there, it just feels good no matter how I grab it. So I've got to give Hogue or Sig Sauer, whoever was responsible in designing this whole thing, uh, they've done a great job. While we're on that, let's just point out it is a four-way repositionable pocket clip, and it does have, it's a nice deep carry clip, and it's got these little ridges so that when it's in pocket, you sort of have something to grip onto to extract it from the pocket there. And that's a pretty nice touch. I don't know if it's necessary. Frankly, it's there. So I've never been able to try extracting it without those being in place. It might work just fine, but it is a nice touch and it's kind of thoughtful. The other thing I noticed that's kind of thoughtful is notice right here. So we've got this heavy texturing everywhere, except for you can see that little sort of dimple right there. The same thing is on this side, and it's to allow that clip to slide in and out of pocket a little better. So those kinds of details are worth noticing if you're making knives, and they have done a nice job paying attention to that. So now that we've gotten through most of the main body of the discussion, let's go ahead and take a look at some comparisons and ask, how this stacks up. First of all, the price on these I think is around $130, which is pretty good. That's, you can get a Manix for around that price, maybe 140. I know you can get the BD1 Manix for even less. I think they're a little over $100. But there it is with a Manix. You can see very similar size, similar cutting edge. In fact, I find a lot of similarity there. Keeping with that sort of theme of, shorter knives with a nice big comfortable choil. We've got the American Lawman. Again, this compares very closely to an American Lawman. What else have I got? Para 2 makes sense to take a look at here. So there we are beside a Para 2. All right, you can see it's a little smaller than the Para 2, but nothing to worry about. And finally, what I would consider to be the closest competitor would be all of either the Benchmade Griptilian or the Benchmade Freak. Of course, those two in FRN would be close to this. This happens to be the Super Freak in G10. You could also compare this to the higher end G10 version of the Griptilian, or the Ritter Hogue, the RK, I don't know, whatever it is, MK1G2. All right. This is kind of standing in for all those Griptilian-ish knives. And well, I like this better because there's a little more cutting edge and a little more handle available. It's a very, very good alternative. And I would take this perhaps over the standard Freak with that rubberized coating. This is a little bit better than that, I would find. Really stacks up well to a very daunting competitor in that the whole Benchmade Griptilian sort of family of knives. There's a few similar there. The other, I guess we could throw in a couple of others. It does remind me of the Scoria a little bit, just because it's fairly slim, like similar size, similar ability to choke up into that choil there. And even the Spyderco Amalgam to a degree, just because of the similar ergonomics. I find these both to be exceptionally comfortable in hand, while the Amalgam is much bigger, similar philosophy to how it's going to work in hand. So overall, what do I think of this knife? I think it's really well done. It's not my favorite knife out there. I've shown you a couple knives that I like a little bit better, and there are a couple little nitpicks that I have. One thing I didn't pick on, because to me it doesn't actually impact performance, but someone called this a horn and asked, what is the story with the horn? And I'm sure the purpose there is so that when you do choke up, you don't run the risk of cutting yourself. But in my mind, they could have just then extended that choil, made it a little bit bigger, and maybe had the meat somewhere here. So it's a safety feature. It's arguable whether or not it's a necessary one, but I guess I should have mentioned that when I was talking about the blade. So we'll kind of squeeze that in at the end as one of the nitpicks that I've heard out there. Overall, I think they've done a really nice job of this. This is a pretty easy knife to recommend for the price point, for the materials, for the ease of carry, for the action. There are a lot of good things about this knife. And so overall, I'm very, very impressed. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I can't promise you. I think that over at White Mountain Knives, they will have some of these, but I think I only saw the serrated version last time I checked, which You guys know how I feel about serrated blades. That's probably one to skip. But go ahead and check. And if you do see one over there, you can save yourself 10% off with my discount code Sharp Stuff. Same goes for um, Southern Edge Knife Works. Sharp Stuff will get you 15% off over there. All right. Again, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. We'll talk to you soon.